Part 96. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 951. Chapter 951 Then go out sideways. Zhao Yi was thinking in her mind when she suddenly saw a black shadow settling behind her. When Zhao Yi realized it and looked back, she felt a dull pain in the back of her neck, and her eyes also went dark. The person who came moved very quickly, holding the unconscious Zhao Yi on his shoulders almost without stopping, and disappeared. By the time Bailey Lingyu hurried to the pavilion, there was indeed someone playing the piano in the pavilion, but that person was no longer Zhao Yi, but Fan Qinjiao. Bailey Lingyu. It can be said that he was stunned in place as if struck by lightning. Fan Qinjiao looked at the fifth prince, who had an unacceptable look on his face, and spoke first. I heard that the fifth prince was talking about the nunnery yesterday. I wonder what is in this nunnery that makes the fifth prince think so deeply. In fact, Bailey Lingyu felt a little guilty when he saw Fan Qinjiao. After all, the overall situation was at stake now, and it was really unjustifiable for him to show up rashly. But, sister-in-law, tell me, has Zhao Yi been here before? Bailey Lingyu looked at Fan Qinjiao and asked. Yes, I have indeed been here. Fan Qinjiao nodded. Bailey Lingyu probably didn't expect Fan Qinjiao to answer so cheerfully. He had been holding back his words, but now he didn't know where to start. Fan Qinjiao stood up and walked towards the fifth prince. A lot of things happened to the fifth prince after he passed out, but this is not the time to talk. Why don't the fifth prince follow me back to the palace first, and it won't be too late to talk while walking on the road. Bailey Lingyu stood there, not wanting to leave. The figure he saw just now belonged to Zhao Yi. Why did he become the emperor's wife when he came over? It seems that His Highness the fifth prince can no longer trust me, Fan Qinjiao said sadly to himself. Bailey Lingyu quickly came back to his senses. Looking at Fan Qinjiao's expression, he felt uncomfortable. The emperor's sister-in-law followed him and the emperor's brother through all the obstacles. If he didn't even believe the emperor's sister-in-law, he really didn't know how to believe it. Who? Sister-in-law, I. Before Bailey Lingyu could finish speaking, Fan Qinjiao's eyes turned cold. Since His Highness the fifth prince doesn't want to take the initiative to walk out obediently, then just lie down sideways. Bailey Lingyu. What does this mean? We have something to say that we can't talk about properly. Just when he was thinking about what these words meant, Bailey Lingyu's body suddenly fell to the ground without his control, and his head hit the ground heavily. This time, Bailey Lingyu finally knew what Fan Qinjiao meant. Sister-in-law, please drug me, Bailey Lingyu complained while lying on the ground. Fan Qinjiao clapped his hands, lowered his eyes slightly and said, if this is not the case, how can His Highness do what I want? Bailey Lingyu looked at the dust still flying in Fan Qinjiao's hands and realized that he had been tricked from the moment he entered the pavilion. But the problem is, sister-in-law, how are you okay? Oh, I took the antidote in advance. Bailey Lingyu. Suddenly, I felt that my martial arts skills were just a joke. Sister-in-law, can we do this? Bailey Lingyu was still struggling on the ground. Fan Qinjiao looked at the fifth prince indifferently. If the fifth prince was willing to nod just now, I would naturally give the antidote to the fifth prince. Now I still ask the fifth prince to cooperate and return to the carriage. If you really don't wait for me to use it, Silver Needle, I'm afraid the fifth highness won't even be able to speak. As Fan Qinjiao finished speaking, Daqiu-ni, who was already waiting not far away, came over with a group of sisters-in-law, and couldn't help but say something. He put the fifth prince into a nun's robe, carried him and walked towards the back door of the nunnery. Bailey Lingyu was almost completely unable to take care of himself, and was thrown into a carriage by a group of sisters-in-law. It was Yan Qian who was standing beside the carriage. It's really spectacular. Not long after, Fan Qinjiao came over, looked at Yan Qian and asked, how are things going? Yan Qian quickly lowered his voice and said, Don't worry, Crown Princess, I have carefully searched the surroundings and found no other informants. As for the person, I have ordered others to send him away secretly. Fan Kinjao nodded, thank you for your hard work, Mr. Yan. The Crown Princess is serious, this is what a slave should do. Yan Qian did not dare to show his dignity in front of the Crown Princess. He watched Fan Kinjao get on the carriage, and the shock in his heart could not be recovered for a long time even now. Unless he had seen it with his own eyes, who would have believed that the Crown Princess who came later would be the one who came last? Not only did he press Zhao Yi in advance, but he also the fifth prince directly. The Crown Princess is really smart. After getting off the carriage, she did not look for the Dakayuni or rush to find out the whereabouts of the fifth prince. Instead, she casually asked a sister-in-law where the most beautiful scenery in this nunnery is, and the most beautiful one. A place that is hard to spot and rarely visited. As a result, I immediately found out about the nunnery and a small garden. Yan Qian felt like he was dreaming when he thought about it now. No wonder the queen admired the crown princess so much. Not everyone could master the ability to directly attack Huanglong. However, Yan Qian still didn't understand one thing: how did the crown princess know that he knew how to use martial arts? No matter how many questions he has, Yan Qian doesn't dare to ask the princess now. That one Zhao Yi first, and then the fifth prince. As big as he was, he had better not hang out in front of the crown princess, otherwise he would not even know how he died. In fact, Fan Kinjao had guessed that Yan Qian was good at martial arts since the empress asked Yan Qian to accompany her out of the palace. Otherwise, the queen would never find someone to drag her back. Fan Kinjao did not expect that Yan Qian's martial arts would be so good. If he compared it carefully, he should not lose to the fifth prince. As expected, the queen has always been surrounded by crouching tigers and hidden dragons in the palace. As for wanting to pry into Zhao Yi's thoughts, obviously much simpler. Zhao Yi, a woman who is good at putting on airs in front of men, naturally has to make her reunion with the fifth prince extremely poignant, so as to prove that this period of time is not easy for her. Furthermore, since Zhao Yi wanted to hide until she met the fifth prince before showing up, she naturally had to hide early. The nunnery, like the Huguo temple, looks quite big, but there are no places where people can hide. Not much. Sister-in-law, why did Zhao Yi become the Yuan family's aunt? Did she really marry into the Yuan family? Bailey Lingyu, who was lying on the carriage, looked at Fan Kinjao and asked. Fan Kinjao knew that he couldn't hide this matter even if he wanted to. Looking at the fifth prince, he told the story about Zhao Yi leaving the house by herself and marrying into the Yuan family by virtue of her own ability. Bailey Lingyu's eyes widened when he heard this, which showed how badly he was struck by lightning. Fan Kinjao was speechless looking at the fifth prince like this. Who made Zhao Yi pretend to be so perfect in front of the fifth prince? Now that his illusions are shattered, it is normal for him to be hit. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 952. Chapter 952, Fighting and Fighting, no winning, no fighting. After a long while, Bailey Lingyu said, Sister-in-law, you lied to me, right? Fan Kinjao looked at the fifth prince and asked, why should I lie to you? Bailey Lingyu was stunned all of a sudden. There seems to be no reason to lie to him. But he just couldn't accept that Zhao Yi was a changeable and vain woman, but he didn't say these words anymore because he knew it would be useless even if he said them. How could you come to the nunnery so well? Fan Kinjao asked. Bailey Lingyu didn't intend to hide anything, and said truthfully, someone in the palace sent me a message yesterday, saying that Zhao Yi was at the nunnery, so I wanted to go and have a look today. But do you remember clearly the appearance of the palace man? He spoke to me through the door at that time. I was worried about being tempted, so I remained silent. Fan Kinjao nodded, okay, I'm not completely stupid. Bailey Lingyu. How do you say that you are also attacking someone personally? Fan Kinjao looked at the depressed look on the fifth prince's face and already had a plan in mind. Since he can be found in the palace to do things, it is obvious that he must be a relatively prestigious person in the palace. Who else can do such a thing? Apparently, concubine Yu was worried that the fifth prince was pretending to be unconscious, so she resorted to such a trick. Fortunately, the queen noticed it in time, otherwise the consequences would have been unimaginable. Originally, Fan Kinjao did not intend to do anything too extreme, but now it seems that if the fifth prince is not pushed to a dead end, he will not know how vast the world of turning back is. The queen had made arrangements early in the palace. After Fan Kinjao entered the palace in a carriage, he followed the path back to Fenji Palace. After the two of them returned to Fenji Palace, one could imagine how miserable the fifth prince would be scolded by the empress. For an entire hour, the curses in the ears of the fifth prince never stopped, not even a repeated word. Bailey Lingyu, who was scolded to death by the empress, didn't even dare to take a breath, let alone retort, for fear that if he took a wrong breath, he would be slapped to death by the queen. By the time the queen had completely calmed down, it was already dark. Empress Zhen 11 simply left Fan Kinjao to have dinner in Fenji Palace. As for the fifth prince, like to eat or not? After Fan Kinjao had dinner, he was not in a hurry to leave Fenji Palace. Instead, accompanied by Yan Qian, he came to the door of a woodshed deep in Fenji Palace. At this time, several palace servants were guarding the door of the woodshed. When they saw the crown princess coming, they quickly stepped forward to salute. This servant pays his respects to the crown princess. Without waiting for Fan Kinjao to speak, Yan Qian waved his hand to several palaces guarding at the door. When the palace people retreated, they personally opened the door of the firewood house. The dilapidated door was pushed open, and the entire woodshed was in full view. Fan Kinjao stepped in and saw Zhao Yi lying on the ground in a state of embarrassment. Her body was tightly tied with ropes, and her mouth was stuffed with fear. Zhao Yi, who had woken up a long time ago, had eyes full of fear. When she saw Fan Kinjao, the look of fear in her eyes just added some other thoughts. Fan Kinjao took the initiative to walk over and look down at Zhao Yi in front of him. I can let you speak, but if you are smart, you'd better not make too much noise. After all, you are in the palace. If something really happens, the thing is, even if I don't want you to die, you won't survive tomorrow. Zhao Yi's body obviously tensed up when she heard the word Imperial Palace. Yan Qian watched the scene and exited the woodshed and closed the door tightly. He was not worried about how noisy Zhao Yi would be. Anyway, he couldn't make a fuss at all in front of the crown princess. Fan Kinjao bent down and took off the soft handkerchief from Zhao Yi's mouth, looked at her and said, "You don't need to be so nervous. I invite you here today. I just want to ask you something clearly." Zhao Yi glared at Fan Kinjao angrily, as if looking at the enemy who killed her father. "You ruined my good deeds again. Where did I provoke you to make you dislike me so much?" She had obviously seen the fifth prince. If it hadn't been for Fan Kinjao's appearance, how could she have suffered such grievances here at this moment? "I really don't want you to see the fifth prince again, but I think you should know better than me as to why." Zhao Yi froze and gritted her teeth. "I don't know what you are talking about." Fan Kinjao looked at Zhao Yi with a smile. "There is no one else here except you and me, so why do you hide your true thoughts? If you really loved the fifth prince wholeheartedly, I would not stop you. Even if you really want to defect to the Yuan family, I won't participate in the slightest. After all, I don't have so much time to waste on unimportant people. It's my freedom to choose how I want to." "You are right, but the person you want to hurt is related to me, so when you think you know the true identity of the fifth prince, you want to step on the Yuan family and climb back to the high branch of the fifth prince. At that time, do you think I will let you get what you want?" Zhao Yi looked at Fan Qinjiao angrily. The fifth prince will not marry just one woman. I just want to have enough food and clothing. Even if you can stop me today, can you stop others in the future? Fan Qinjiao looked at Zhao Yi indifferently. We'll talk about other things someday, but since you've shown your fox's tail, I have no reason to sit idly by. Zhao Yi's eyes were about to burst into flames. Ever since she was a child, she had always felt that what she was best at was controlling people's hearts. For this reason, although she was born in poverty, she had a smooth journey. But when she was in front of Fan Qinjiao, all her methods became so worthless. Mentioned. You can't win after fighting, and you can't win after arguing again and again. This feeling of being extremely angry and powerless is simply going to make Zhao Yi angry to death. Fan Qinjiao looked at Zhao Yi's twisted face, but he didn't feel the slightest sense of accomplishment. After all, she was standing here today not to show off. Since you have asked everything you want to ask, why not tell me what I want to know? Zhao Yi stared at Fan Qinjiao with no intention of speaking. Fan Qinjiao was not angry at all, and smiled lightly. You are a little clever, but your city can't plan such a big plan. When you disappeared, your appearance today should be complimentary. It was my negligence and I did not take you into consideration, but now that you have returned to my hands, should you tell me who is helping you secretly? Zhao Yi's expression changed, but she still had no intention of speaking. Fan Qinjiao reached out and pinched Zhao Yi's chin. It's not something you can do to send a message to the fifth prince inside the palace. Even if you don't say anything, I have plenty of ways to make you speak. Of course, the prerequisite is that you must not be afraid of pain. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 953. Chapter 953, Hit Your Head Against the Wall. Zhao Yi looked at Fan Qinjiao in horror, as if looking at an evil ghost. She has never seen a woman so cruel and ruthless. Fan Qinjiao looked at Zhao Yi with a smile. My patience is limited. If you don't say it now, it will be too late if you want to say it yourself later. Zhao Yi suffered losses at Fan Qinjiao's hands one after another. Why didn't she understand how ruthless Fan Qinjiao's methods were? Although she hated Fan Qinjiao, she was still forced to say helplessly, I haven't seen that one either. She doesn't look like that, but I know she's a woman, and she sounds like she's not too old. She is a woman, not very old. Fan Qinjiao could only think of Yunyu. In this way, it was pretty much what she imagined. So, why did you join forces with her? Fan Qinjiao looked at Zhao Yi and asked again. With Zhao Yi's little cleverness, how could she take the bait if the other party didn't throw out the bait? Zhao Yi bit her lip and said after a long while, that person said that as long as I can see the fifth prince, he will secretly operate so that I can successfully become the fifth prince's woman. From now on, I will have no worries about food and drink, and there will be countless more of glory and wealth. Eat and drink without worries, and have countless glory and wealth. I have to say, this cake is indeed very beautiful. In that case, you can continue to dream of your sweet dreams, but I think you will never appear in front of the fifth prince again. Fan Qinjiao turned around and left, having already asked all the questions that should be asked. After that, there was no need for her to stay here any longer. Zhao Yi knew that as long as Fan Qinjiao existed, there would never be a relationship between her and the fifth prince, but now that she heard it with her own ears, she still couldn't help but cursed angrily, Fan Qinjiao, you bitch, you must, it's going to be a bad death. Fan Qinjiao didn't even stop when he heard the curses behind him. Yan Qian, who had been waiting at the door for a long time, heard the footsteps and quickly opened the door of the woodshed. As the light from outside shone in, Zhao Yi, whose face was still distorted, suddenly froze. Because standing outside the door at this moment are Queen Zhen 11, Bailey Fengming and Bailey Lingyu. Zhao Yi looked at the people outside with wide eyes, shocked and frightened. So what she said to Fan Qinjiao just now was heard by the fifth prince. Zhao Yi quickly said, "Your Highness, listen to me, it's not like this, it really isn't like this, I just want to see you so much, but you still remember how good you were to me." Bailey Lingyu looked at Zhao Yi like this and turned around silently. He has heard everything that should be heard. He likes Zhao Yi, but he is not a fool. When he knew that Zhao Yi had a purpose in approaching him from the beginning, his deep love faded away. Fortunately, the Queen Mother and the Emperor's sister-in-law took action in time today, otherwise even he would have caused a catastrophe. Zhao Yi looked at the back of the fifth prince and said without giving up, "Your Highness, please look back at me. I really didn't realize my sincerity until now. Didn't you say that as long as you see me smiling, you will feel at ease? From now on, can I laugh with you alone?" Empress Zhen 11 frowned and ordered Yan Qian, "Shut your mouth, what will it look like if it's full of filthy words?" Yan Qian looked at the queen, as if he was thinking about something. Seeing that the queen had no intention of speaking again, he quickly stepped into the woodshed. Soon, the woodshed became quiet. Not just Fan Qinjiao, everyone present knew what the silence meant. Even if this matter was not Zhao Yi's intention, Zhao Yi's stupidity made her jump into this pit of fire. Since she knows what she shouldn't know, only closing her mouth forever will make people feel at ease. Bailey Lingyu's clenched fists unclenched again, and the expression on his face became more relieved amid the pain. Empress Zhen 11 looked at Bailey Fengming and said, "It's getting late. Please send Xiao Qinjiao out of the palace first." Bailey Fengming nodded and took Fan Qinjiao's hand out of Fenji Palace. Seeing that the key was about to be dropped inside the palace, it was inconvenient for him to follow him out of the palace, so he could only watch Fan Qinjiao get into the carriage. Fan Qinjiao looked at Bailey Fengming standing in the night through the carriage window. In fact, she had been waiting for him to speak. After all, it was her suggestion today that the fifth prince could hear what Zhao Yi said in person. "I just waited and waited, but I just waited until," Bailey Fengming said, "go back and rest early." The voice is still as soft as ever. Fan Qinjiao nodded and saw that he didn't ask, so he didn't explain. In Fenji Palace, the atmosphere was a bit depressing. When Bailey Fengming entered the door, he saw Bai sending the people out of the yard, leaving a man standing guard outside the door. In the palace, Bailey Lingyu's figure had long disappeared. Queen Zhengzi was sitting on the arhat bed thinking about something. When she saw Bailey Fengming coming in, she said, "Yunyu came just now." Bailey Fengming personally poured tea and handed it to his mother. He was not surprised by Yunyu's arrival. Since he had persuaded Zhao Yi to seduce the fifth emperor's younger brother, he was now here to check and accept the results. Empress Zhen 11 took the tea, sipped it and said, "Fortunately, Yunyu has no definite evidence to prove that the fifth prince is really pretending to be unconscious. I have also made an explanation at the nunnery. If you want to survive, you should not say anything nonsense." Bailey Fengming nodded and said, "Brother Three Emperors is trying so hard that he may have put all his treasures on the 15th day. Fortunately, my son and Ayao have already made arrangements in advance. Who will win and who will lose, we will see the result in a few days." Speaking of Fan Qinjiao, Queen Zhen 11 looked at Bailey Fengming and said, "I didn't expect that Xiao Qinjiao could really press the fifth prince to go outside the woodshed. It is impossible for Zhao Yi and Zhao Yi to survive until tomorrow. In fact, there is no need to go to such trouble. What is heard is naturally different from what is seen." Empress Zhen 11 thought of the silent look on the face of the fifth prince before leaving. Xiao Qinjiao pushed his head and hit it against the south wall. It would be strange if he didn't get hurt. I don't blame Xiao Qinjiao, but the youthful feelings are always crazy. I'm afraid this injury will never heal in my lifetime. Queen Zhen 11 is someone who has been through this, so she naturally knows how painful emotional injuries are. Calculating it, she has been married to the emperor for decades. Even though she has seen the faces of various scumbags in the emperor, she still has to lick her wounds in the dead of night. It was because she had been in pain that she didn't want the child she valued to suffer too. Speaking of which, the fifth prince's mother-in-law died early, and the fifth prince was raised by her. Bailey Fengming poured himself a cup of tea, looked at the tea that was slowly flowing out, and said softly, "My son understands that the queen feels sorry for the fifth emperor brother, but there are some things that you have to hit the south wall to feel the pain." Yao did this just because he didn't want the fifth emperor brother to make the same mistake again. Queen Zhengzi looked at her son. "Actually, there are no other ways." Bailey Fengming put down the teapot and blew the foam on the tea. His dark eyes were distracted for a moment, but only in this way will it be the most unforgettable and powerful. After all, this is how Yao came along. Empress Zhengzi saw that her son had already talked about this, but she didn't say anything more. That night, an unknown female corpse was secretly transported out of the palace. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 954. Chapter 954. The minister of Dali Temple took sides. Although Zhao Yi's incident seemed to have passed peacefully, it still sounded the alarm for many people. The one who got the loudest knock was the Yuan family. When Mrs Yuan received the news sent by De Kaiyuni, she was so shocked that she couldn't even speak. Fortunately, she found out that the crown princess and the queen had settled the matter, so she was relieved for a long time. Take a breath. When the minister of Dali Temple came back in the evening, Mrs Yuan's wife hurriedly told the story. The minister of Dali Temple. It's true that the more you fear something, the more likely it will come. Thinking back to when Zhao Yi disappeared, he felt that there must be something hidden, but he didn't expect that it almost led to a catastrophe. Although Zhao Yi has been expelled from the house by the Yuan family, if something really happened because of Zhao Yi, how can the Yuan family explain it clearly? Speaking of which, what happened this time is really thanks to the crown princess's alertness. Dakayuni sent someone to tell her that she was just one step away. If the fifth prince saw Zhao Yi, he didn't know what kind of trouble he would cause Mrs Yuan's family. Sighing, "Even now I am still scared." Did the crown princess send someone to say anything? The minister of Dali Temple asked. Mrs Yuan shook her head. There has been no movement. I don't know if the crown princess is blaming us. If the crown princess is really angry with us, what should we do? The minister of Dali Temple looked at his wife's panicked look and consoled her. Given the way the crown princess behaves, if she really blamed our family, there wouldn't be anything happening until now. So the crown princess didn't blame us. Mrs Yuan's family breathed a sigh of relief. I didn't expect that the crown princess could have such a clear mind at such a young age. There are not many people like the crown princess in this world. Hearing this, the minister of Dali Temple did not say anything to refute. In fact, the minister of Dali Temple was also surprised when he heard that the fifth prince was awake. But if you think about it carefully, you will understand that it was very strange when the fifth prince was in a coma. Now that the prince is in the main city, I am afraid that if the news of the fifth prince's recovery is concealed, there must be a bigger hidden secret behind it. Yes. The minister of Dali Temple did not know why the fifth prince wanted to conceal the news of his awakening, but he understood that once the matter was leaked, it would not be a child's play. Speaking of which, what happened to Zhao Yi was also the negligence of the Yuan family. If someone had been looking for someone to watch Zhao Yi, there would have been no hidden dangers. But now there is no movement even from the queen's side. Of course, the minister of Dali Temple will not naively think that the queen will not anger the Yuan family, so the only possibility is that someone has put in a good word for the Yuan family. And this person will only be the crown princess. Master, Can I go to Hwa's house tomorrow? Mrsun thought, always wanting to thank the crown princess in person. You don't need to say anything for now, just leave this matter to me. Of course, the minister of Dali Temple didn't want his wife to get involved again. Not everyone can afford to wade into the muddy water in front of him. However, Dali Temple did not panic. If something like this happened, even if the queen did not express her position, the prince would take the initiative to find him. Although the minister of Dali Temple never thought of taking sides, this matter was related to the Yuan family after all. So, even if it was a favor to the prince, his team would still recognize its side. What Dali Temple minister didn't expect was that he was waiting for the crown prince to come and take him on board the ship, but there was no movement from the crown prince. The minister of Dali Temple. What's the situation? No matter what the situation was, the minister of Dali Temple really couldn't sit still and had no choice but to go find the prince himself. Bailey Fengming had known about the matter between Zhao Yi and the Yuan family for a long time, and he also knew that as long as he opened his mouth at this time, the Dali Temple minister would definitely take sides. But the more this happened, the more Bailey Fengming said nothing about standing in line. He didn't even say a word of blame in front of the minister of Dali Temple. Instead, he comforted the minister of Dali Temple. How can the minister of Dali Temple withstand the sugar-coated bullets from the prince? There was almost no need to wait for the prince to speak. The minister of Dali Temple, who had been forced to take sides, took the initiative and consciously stood silently behind the prince. Fan Kinjao was really surprised when he learned about this. This should be the so-called blessing. No matter when Bailey Rongs finds out about this, I'm afraid he will vomit blood. As the 15th day got closer and closer, the originally busy palace became quiet. Just when everyone was suspicious, the princes suddenly received the news that the emperor had summoned him to accompany the prince of Donglan to have a meal. Although the princes and concubines were also summoned to the palace, they were not invited to attend, but stayed behind. He went to the palaces of various concubines and had meals with his mother-in-law. When Fan Kinjao received the summons, he would be lying if he said he was not surprised. Normally, tomorrow would be the 15th day. The emperor suddenly held a banquet at this time, which would be a bit too much work. However, the emperor's summons could not be delayed, so Fan Kinjao immediately dressed up carefully and got on the carriage entering the palace. Fan Kinjao arrived at Fenji Palace all the way. Lily, who had been waiting at the door for a long time, stepped forward and saluted, and then took Fan Kinjao to the palace where the fifth prince temporarily stayed. Fan Kinjao stepped into the door and saw the fifth prince talking to the queen. Although he looked a little haggard, he was not haggard like he was about to die. As soon as Bailey Lingyu saw Fan Kinjao, his whole body felt as if his acupoints had been tapped, and there was no movement at all. Fan Kinjao seemed not to have seen anything. He first stepped forward to salute the queen and say hello, my daughter-in-law has met my mother. Queen Zhen 11 pulled Fan Kinjao up, sat down next to her, and then said, there are some people who keep talking about you when they don't see you, and when they really see you, they become mute again. Bailey Lingyu. It's true that the closer someone is to someone, the more ruthless they will be to undermine them. Queen Zhen 11 glanced at Bailey Lingyu and said, why are you looking at me like that? Did I say something wrong? You didn't say it yourself. After your sister-in-law enters the palace, you should admit your mistake to your fourth sister-in-law. Yes, if a man keeps his word, how can he go back on his words? Bailey Lingyu really didn't want to speak but couldn't stop speaking. She looked at Fan Kinjao and called out, sister-in-law. Although it was just two simple words, Fan Kinjao knew that as long as the fifth prince was still willing to take the initiative to speak, it proved that Zhao Yi's matter was completely over. After the 15th year, His Highness will be able to wake up naturally, but before that, His Highness will need to recuperate for a period of time before he can recover. 15 years later, Bailey Rong's trick had long been exposed. At that time, the fifth prince naturally no longer needs to hide. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 955. Chapter 955, The Little Public Examination in the First Month. The Emperor's sister-in-law doesn't need to worry about me. I eat well and sleep well here with the Queen. Bailey Lingyu looked at Fan Kinjao gratefully. Sure enough, the Emperor's sister-in-law was still kind to her, unlike the Queen who knew how to expose him. Lao did. Queen Zhen 11 looked at the fifth prince with a smile. I have good food and accommodation here. Didn't I almost miss you? Bailey Lingyu. Mother, can we get over this matter? I know I was wrong, okay. The Emperor's sister-in-law doesn't blame me, so just stop irritating me. Bailey Lingyu really gave in. What else can we do? He has finally figured out Zhao Yi's matter. A woman who approached him just to take advantage of him from the beginning is not worthy of his continued concern. Even though his heart still hurts terribly. But the Emperor is right, no matter how painful something is, it will pass as long as it hurts. Empress Zhen 11 looked at the resentful little eyes of the fifth prince, and finally stopped mentioning the fifth prince's scars. She looked at Fan Kinjao and said, the Emperor's banquet with the sixth prince of Donglan this time is too sudden. Sir, I feel uneasy. It was better not to know what the Emperor was doing before, but now we know everything. The Emperor's every move naturally makes people feel uneasy. Who knows what tricks the Emperor will come up with? Fan Kinjao thought for a while and said, my daughter-in-law and mother-in-law have thought of the same thing. It's just that it's not easy to figure out the Emperor's thoughts right now. We can only take one step at a time. Queen Zhen 11 nodded and said, you are right. No matter how much we guess now, it will be in vain. We might as well wait and see what the Emperor is planning. Didn't you say that the Donglan Kingdom has taken the initiative to suspend the transportation of goods with us in Ziliang? My father is impatient at this time. It is not impossible to please the sixth prince of the Donglan Kingdom. If you ask me to say that you, Queen Mother, are too unreasonable, Bailey Lingyu said. Empress Zhen 11 glanced at the fifth prince, wishing that important things were really that simple. At the moment, the Emperor only cares about how to turn into an old monster. How can he care about other things in his heart? To put it bluntly, even if the Emperor's heart is a little pretentious, it is impossible for the Emperor to bow his head in front of Donglin and ask for peace. In the final analysis, isn't it because you don't have the heart to deal with it, so you want to make peace with it? Fan Kinjao looked at the Empress's cold face and knew that she probably hated the Emperor to a certain extent. Although what the fifth prince said didn't make sense, there was really no need to blindly consume himself for a scumbag. Speaking of which, my daughter-in-law misses the taste of the food here after not having dinner with her mother these days, Fan Kinjao said with a smile. How could Queen Zhen 11 not see that Fan Kinjao was coaxing her? She sighed and said, I have arranged for people to cook a lot of your favorite dishes. If it is not enough, you can order more. Bailey Lingyu hurriedly said, Queen Mother, what about mine? Is my favorite pork elbow arranged? Queen Zhen 11 glanced at the fifth prince and said, which sleepy person have you seen who still has the strength to chew his elbow? The fifth prince. Mother, is it really okay for you to value your daughter-in-law over your son? Several people in the dormitory were talking when they saw the dormitory door being pushed open. Lily stepped in, holding a small ball in her arms. As soon as the little man saw the queen, he stretched out his chubby arms anxiously and kept babbling. Empress Zhen 11 quickly hugged him in her arms and said with a smile, our little Yuanyu is getting more and more beautiful. The little man seemed to have heard the queen's praise. He grinned with a small mouth filled with the fragrance of milk and kept giggling. Fan Kinjao looked at the little man in confusion and didn't react for a moment. Seeing this, Lily explained, this is the little Princess Yunying promised to give birth to. Fan Kinjao. I really didn't expect that Fan Swinning was not a very good person, but the daughter she gave birth to would grow up so well. Just when Fan Kinjao looked at Yunu, Yunu also looked at Fan Kinjao, and before Fan Kinjao could react, Yunu took the initiative to reach out to Fan Kinjao. Fan Kinjao was stunned for a moment, then stood up and took Yunu from the Empress's arms. Yunu seemed to like Fan Kinjao very much. She grabbed a strand of hair on Fan Kinjao's chest and narrowed her little eyes into slits when she smiled. Seeing this, Fan Kinjao was not stingy. He just hugged Yunu and sat on the chair, letting Yunu play with his hair, even if it hurt. Lily looked at the scene and wanted to step forward to stop it. Princess Yunu is the child that Yuning promised, and who did Yuning promise to? Queen Zhen 11 looked at Lily and shook her head. Even if Yunu's mother was not good, there was no need to involve the children in adult affairs. Furthermore, Yunu has not seen her biological mother since she was born, so what does it have to do with Fan Swinning? With Xiao Qinjiao's grudges and kindness, he is able to coax Yunu now, which is from his heart. Our Yunu likes long hair so much. Don't worry Yunu. When you grow up, you will also have the same long hair. Then I will give you some prescriptions, which will definitely make our Yunu happy. Her hair is jet black. Fan Kinjao hugged Yunu and coaxed. Yunu couldn't understand what Fan Kinjao said, but she could still feel the kindness shown by Fan Kinjao. She used to be very close to Fan Kinjao, but now she was like a sloth. On Fan Kinjao's neck, Lily watched Princess Yunu drooling all over the Crown Princess, but the Crown Princess didn't feel the slightest bit displeased, and she was finally relieved. The Queen was right. How could such a shrewd person like the Crown Princess really be indifferent to grudges? Bailey Lingyu felt itchy in her heart when she looked at Yunu's chubby appearance. He stood up and walked towards Fan Kinjao, just to tease Yunu. Unexpectedly, as soon as she stretched out her hand, Yunu snorted and buried her little head in Fan Kinjao's arms. Bailey Lingyu. What does mean? Bailey Lingyu didn't believe that evil, and stretched out his hand to touch Yunu, but Yunu refused to let him touch it, and firmly stuffed his little head into Fan Kinjao's arms. Bailey Lingyu's face changed with anger, and she pointed at Yunu and said, "You are not very old, but you still know how to watch people order dishes. Little girl, just wait. I will definitely give birth to a son in the future and let my son pinch you every day. My face, pinch your face into a little bun." Yunu, who was still buried in Fan Kinjao's arms, suddenly burst into tears. Bailey Lingyu. Are you so scared? Queen Zhen 11 rolled her eyes at Bailey Lingyu and said, "How old are you, and you still get angry with a child? Look at your potential." Bailey Lingyu also didn't expect that Yunu would cry whenever she wanted to, so she quickly comforted her. But no matter how he jumped up and down and said all his good things, Yunu just couldn't stop crying. Lily was really afraid that Princess Yunu would do something wrong with her crying, so she simply took Yunu out. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 956. Chapter 956. Its concubine Han Xian. After Yunu left, the food in the front hall was also put on the table. Empress Zhen 11 first had food delivered to the fifth prince, and then took Fan Kinjao to the flower hall. Unexpectedly, as soon as the two of them sat down, they saw a palace official running over. "Empress," concubine Han Xian said that today's dishes are too bland, and she wants the imperial kitchen to cook a few more delicious dishes. The palace servant said and handed over the menu. Empress Zhen 11 looked at the menu in front of her, her face looking very ugly. 9 out of 10 dishes are all complicated meat dishes. Han Xianfei is not afraid of exhausting herself to death. Fan Kinjao also glanced at the menu. When he saw the phoenix dancing for 9 days, he frowned and said, Ms. Sun Xianfei knows how to order. The menu in the imperial dining room is mixed, and there are all kinds of dishes, but not every dish can be ordered by the concubines in the harem. Just like today's dish of phoenix dance for 9 heavens. Although there is no clear rule not to order it, the word phoenix is on the dish, which reflects the identity of the queen, so the concubines in the harem naturally avoid it. But now concubine Han Xian ordered such a dish. What was she going to do? The provocation should not be too obvious. Queen Zhen 11 looked at the menu for a long time, then sneered, and said, Concubine Han Xian helped concubine you, and now she is showing off her power. I want to see when her illness will be cured. One cannot always be sick, there must be a day when one recovers. Fan Kinjao did not understand what the queen said. Did the queen mother say that concubine Han Xian was ill? Empress Zhen 11 threw the menu on the table and said coldly, the issue of the Gun's judgment was caused by concubine Han Xian. Fan Kinjao finally understood after hearing this. It was concubine Han Xian who was ill at first, and then the imperial doctor went to diagnose and treat concubine Han Xian. Later, she prescribed a prescription and sent it to concubine Han Xian. It happened that there was a young beside concubine Han who knew some simple things. Medicinal ingredients. I just recognized one of the medicinal ingredients in the recipe and grabbed the wrong one. Fan Kinjao will naturally understand what happened later. Master took the blame for this and left the palace. Although it was not a big deal, it was a basin of dirty water that would never be washed away. Fan Kinjao looked at the Empress and narrowed her eyes slightly, and said with a cold look in her eyes, since Empress Han Xianfei is unwell, I, a junior, naturally have no reason to sit back and ignore it, so I also asked the Empress to take me to see Empress Han Xianfei. Diagnosis and treatment are just one or two. Empress Zhen 11 was originally unwilling to talk to concubine Han Xian, she was just a clown, but thinking about the relationship between Ji Hongliao and Fan Kinjao, she nodded after a long silence. But even if I want to go, naturally it cannot be now. Queen Zhen 11 first had a meal with Fan Kinjao, and then ordered someone to send the menu to the imperial dining room. After the meal was finished in the imperial dining room, Queen Zhen 11 got up and left Fenji Palace with Fan Kinjao. Concubine Han Xian didn't expect that the imperial kitchen had been cooking for 2 hours. She finally waited for the food to come, but before she could eat it, she heard that the queen had arrived. Concubine Han Xian. I could only lie down on the bed hungry. When Queen Zhen 11 brought Fan Kinjao in, she saw concubine Han Xian lying sickly on the bed. I would like to express my regards to the queen and my regards to the crown princess Liao Yue, who was in the palace, quickly knelt on the ground with all the palace people. The reason why Liao Yue was able to step into the door of the second prince's mansion was because of concubine Han Xian. Now for Liao Yue, concubine Han Xian was naturally her legitimate mother-in-law. Queen Zhen 11 glanced at Liao Yue before entering the bedroom accompanied by Fan Kinjao. Liao Yue just knelt on the ground and looked at Fan Kinjao walking side by side with the queen. She couldn't tell whether she was jealous or envious. They are also the daughters-in-law of others, but look at Fan Kinjao, and then look at her. This feeling of disparity is really confusing. In the palace, concubine Han Xian saw the queen entering the door and said quickly, I am not feeling well and it is really not appropriate to get up. Please forgive me. Fan Kinjao really didn't expect concubine Han Xian to be so arrogant. She even skipped greeting the Empress by pretending to be sick. Queen Zhen 11 looked at concubine Han Xian with a sympathetic expression, since concubine Han Xian is not feeling well, she can just lie down. Concubine Han Xian lay down on the bed with peace of mind and snorted coldly in her heart. Concubine Yu was right. As long as there was an upright reason, not even the queen could do anything to her. Empress Zhen 11 paused and continued, speaking of which, concubine Han Xian has been ill for some time. I have always been concerned about her, and I just mentioned this matter to the crown princess. Concubine Han Xian glanced at Fan Qinjiao and said, "It's all the judgment of the Gun. No, it shouldn't be called that now, it's all because Ji Hongliao is old and dim. If he hadn't grabbed the wrong medicine, I can't even say hello to the queen." Fan Qinjiao silently looked at concubine Han Xian's proud look, with a chill on her brow. Even now, she still doesn't forget to find reasons for herself to throw dirty water on her master. Concubine Han Xian naturally noticed that Fan Qinjiao looked unhappy, but she deliberately said that. Who made Fan Qinjiao Ji Hongliao's apprentice? She just made it clear that she wanted to irritate Fan Qinjiao. Empress Zhen 11 smiled and said, "The past has passed, and there is no need for concubine Han Xian to keep talking about it." However, the crown princess heard that concubine Han Xian's health has not improved yet, so she wanted to come and take a look. Concubine Han Xian frowned and looked at Fan Qinjiao, then said coolly, "The crown princess is Ji Hongliao's apprentice, I think it's better to forget it." Queen Zhen 11 said, "Ji Hongliao is Ji Hongliao, and the crown princess is the crown princess. Could it be that concubine Han Xian wants to offend me?" Concubine Han Xian. The queen's kindness, of course, she had no reason to refuse. Seeing this, Liao Yue hurriedly stepped forward and said, "The queen's wishes are fulfilled by me." Empress Zhen 11 glanced away and said, "In front of me, it's not your turn to interrupt." Liao Yue froze in place after hearing this. Fan Qinjiao glanced at Liao Yue and then said to concubine Han Xian, "I have always heard that concubine Han Xian attaches great importance to Aunt Liao, who is next to the second prince, but no matter how much she dotes on her, her etiquette cannot be compromised. What I know is that Aunt Liao's background is not high, the education in the mansion is not enough, and those who don't know may think that concubine Han Xian doesn't know how to train her daughter-in-law. Just as concubine Han Xian threw dirty water at her master, she could throw it back. The queen just taught me a lesson, and I think the crown princess also heard it. In front of the queen, it's better for us juniors not to speak." Liao Yue looked at Fan Qinjiao and said, "She was also the daughter-in-law. Who is different from whom?" End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 957. Chapter 957. I really can't lie down this time. Fan Qinjiao looked at Liao Yue and smiled, "Although I am the daughter-in-law of the royal family like Aunt Liao is just an aunt and has the lowest status among all people, but I am appointed by the emperor. The crown princess, in addition to the queen, even the concubines in the harem must bow to each other when they see me." Liao Yue's face turned pale and she looked at concubine Han Xian aside in shock. She really didn't know that the crown princess's status was so high. Concubine Han Xian had always felt that money was enough for Liao Yue to marry the second prince, but now looking at Liao Yue's white eyes, she understood that money and education really cannot be compared. Fan Qinjiao paused and then said, "I heard that Aunt Liao's family is engaged in business. I think she was only focused on making money and ignored Aunt Liao's upbringing and rules." Liao Yue's face, which was originally pale, suddenly glowed with blue light. But what Fan Qinjiao said was more than that. After finishing speaking, Liao Yue looked at concubine Han Xian again. "It's just such a simple rule. Even if Aunt Liao doesn't understand it, doesn't it mean that concubine Han Xian doesn't understand it either? It's so simple to spoil a child like killing a child. Concubine Han Xian should understand." Concubine Han Xian. Liao Yue. "It's really not enough to kill people, but you also have to kill people. Didn't the crown princess say that she wanted to treat me?" Concubine Han Xian said almost through clenched teeth. On the left and right were people brought by the queen. She would definitely not be able to escape this diagnosis and treatment. In this case, it would be better to see a doctor quickly. Let her clean up quickly. If Fan Qinjiao and the Empress were allowed to continue to stand here, she would be really angry and something would happen. After hearing this, Queen Zhen 11 looked at Fan Qingjao and nodded. Fan Qingjao nodded slightly and walked straight to the bed. When he raised his hand to diagnose and treat concubine Han Xian, Fan Qingjao first pulled off the handkerchief from his body and covered concubine Han Xian's wrist. Concubine Han Xian looked at this scene. She didn't get angry to death on the spot because her heart was strong enough. What is this going to do? It is true that imperial doctors need to cover themselves with veils when they diagnose and treat, but that is because men and women are not intimate with each other. It is to avoid suspicion, but why does Fan Qingjao do this now? Is it because she is dirty? Concubine Han Xian felt that she could no longer think about it, as she would explode on the spot if she continued to think about it. Fan Qingjao put his hand on concubine Han Xian's wrist and frowned slightly. Although concubine Han Xian's body was not as weak as she appeared, judging from her pulse, she was indeed feeling a little unwell. I think concubine Lai Yu had already figured out that the queen would bring her here to treat concubine Han Xian, but she actually messed up concubine Han Xian's body with other medicines in advance. Fan Qingjao said softly, depression leads to qi stagnation. If qi stagnates for a long time, it will turn into heat. If heat stagnates, body fluids will be depleted and will not flow, prolonged to depression and fatigue. Looking at Fan Qingjiao's appearance, Queen Zhen 11's heart sank. Concubine Yu is really putting on a show. Hearing this, concubine Han Xian sneered and said, the queen doesn't know something. The imperial doctor said that my biggest concern with this disease is the noise, so I need to calm down and cultivate myself. Just as Empress Zhen 11 was about to speak, Fan Qingjao stood up and said, what concubine Han Xian said is true, but the prescriptions given by the imperial hospital were too conservative, so she has not been able to nurse concubine Han Xian's body well. In this case, how about you give concubine Han Xian a prescription yourself? Concubine Han Xian. Of course it's not good. But she didn't give concubine Han Xian a chance to speak. Queen Zhen 11 said, that's very good. I'm here to keep an eye on you. Concubine Han Xian can rest assured that nothing will go wrong. If concubine Han Xian can't trust me, I'll send someone right now go and invite the emperor. Concubine Han Xian did not expect that the queen would be so cruel that even the emperor would move her away. She was not favored to begin with, so how could she dare to put the emperor through all the trouble? Even though she was very reluctant, concubine Han Xian could only say, with the queen here, I will naturally feel at ease. I am very pleased that concubine Han Xian thinks so. Queen Zhen 11 winked at Fan Qingjao. Scumbag man is a scumbag, but sometimes it is very effective to use it. Fan Qingjao had a plan in mind, so he could write the prescription quickly. Queen Zhen 11 directly asked Yan Qian to take the prescription to the Thai hospital to get the medicine. When the Thai hospital heard that the queen had sent someone to get the medicine, they didn't dare to delay. They checked it carefully several times before handing it over to Yan Qian. When the medicinal materials were returned to Fan Qingjao checked them carefully again. When he saw that there were no problems, he asked the palace staff to cook them. Liao Yue just stood there and watched Fan Qingjao busy. She knew clearly that concubine Han Xian was unhappy, but she didn't even have the qualifications to speak. Fan Qingjao kept watching concubine Han Xian as she drank the medicine, then stood up and left with the queen. However, before the two of them walked out of the courtyard, there was a commotion in the palace behind them. Empress Zhen 11 looked at Fan Qingjao in surprise. What on earth did you feed concubine Han Xian? Fan Qingjao smiled and blinked. Concubine Han Xian is suffering from depression, and my daughter-in-law is just letting concubine Han Xian vent her anger. This prescription is a bit strong, but no matter who looks at it, there is nothing wrong with it. Even though Queen Zhengzi didn't understand medical skills, she still understood the meaning. Her eyes were filled with laughter when she heard the sound of fussing from the palace behind her. This time I am afraid that concubine Han Xian will not be able to lie down even if she wants to lie down again. Fan Kinjao followed the empress all the way to Fenji Palace, and could vaguely hear bursts of laughter coming from the direction of the imperial palace. Fan Kinjao looked at Queen Zhen 11 and listened to the emperor's laughter. Her brows furrowed unconsciously, and she asked, "Why is the queen feeling uncomfortable?" Empress Zhen 11 shook her head. "It's been a while since I heard the emperor smile like this." Of course Fan Kinjao knew why the emperor couldn't laugh. Bailey Rong's elixirs were obviously in short supply, so how could the emperor laugh? So why is the emperor smiling so happily now? Fan Kinjao's brows also frowned silently. Before Fan Kinjao could figure it out, as soon as he returned to Fenji Palace, he heard Beihe say, "Queen, there has just been news from the emperor, saying that the emperor talked about the days of hunting in the palace, and the more he talked about it, the more he became more and more impulsive. Let's just make a decision to leave for the palace tonight and spend the 15th day there." After hearing this, Queen Zhen 11 and Fan Kinjao looked at each other silently. Obviously, neither of them looked very good looking. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 958. Chapter 958 The Sudden Imperial Edict. Queen Zhen 11 looked at Lily and asked, "Did the emperor tell you anything else?" Lily just nodded, replying, "To your majesty, the emperor also said that the residences of these juniors are now very lively. It just so happens that for this 15th reunion, the juniors from each mansion have been ordered to go together." After hearing this, Queen Zhengzi's face became even more ugly. Although it is not a long journey from the imperial palace to the palace, it is not a short trip after a long journey. Originally, everyone went to the palace frequently, and now they all have to hold the little carrot head. Is it possible that the emperor is worried about the fuss? Lily looked at the queen's face and thought that the emperor must not be afraid, otherwise he would have issued an order. Fan Kinjao helped the queen to walk into the palace. She always felt that this matter seemed weird no matter how she looked at it. "My daughter-in-law thinks there is something wrong with this matter, that is." "What's wrong?" The emperor's voice suddenly came from behind, and both Queen Zhengzi and Fan Kinjao were startled. The two of them turned around and saw the emperor walking towards them with long strides, accompanied by Bailey Fengming. All the people in Fenji Palace had already knelt on the ground. Fan Kinjao hurriedly knelt on the ground with the empress to greet the emperor. "My daughter-in-law has met my father." Emperor Yongchang reached out and helped Queen Zhengzi up, but did not let Fan Kinjao get up. "Why, do you have any objections to my proposal?" Empress Zhen 11 knew that the emperor had heard what she just said, but she had no way of knowing how much she had heard. She could only look at Lily beside her. Lily was also caught off guard. She didn't know why the emperor came in. Fan Kinjao lowered his head, his dark eyes flashing with nervousness, but the current situation could not be solved by just being nervous. Suppressing the panic in his heart, Fan Kinjao wanted to carefully distinguish the emperor's tone, and then guessed that even if the emperor heard something, it was only a very small part. Otherwise, he would have gone away in a rage and tried to silence her behind her back instead of standing here questioning her like now. "My daughter-in-law does feel that something is wrong. The weather is not too warm now, and traveling from the palace to the palace is tiring. In addition, the juniors in various mansions are noisy. My daughter-in-law is worried that the queen will not have a good rest," Fan Qingyao said word by word. Emperor Yongchang frowned. "You care about the queen?" Fan Kinjao pinched the handkerchief in his hand and said seriously, "As for my father, my mother has always loved her daughter-in-law, but she lives deep in the palace and has no shortage of everything. My daughter-in-law doesn't know how to return it even if she wants to. However, I can only keep my mother in my heart all the time." Emperor Yongchang looked at Fan Kinjao for a while and then said, "What about me?" Hearing these words, Fan Kinjao lowered his head again. "My daughter-in-law does not dare to speculate on her father without authorization." Empress Zhen 11 supported the emperor's arm and said with a smile, "Your Majesty, please stop teasing the Crown Princess. The Crown Princess looks calmer than others of her age, but after all, she is just a child who is not familiar with the world." Emperor Yongchang looked at Fan Qingjao for a long time before saying, "Get up and talk." Fan Qingjao quickly thanked her and stood up, and then stood beside the queen in an orderly manner. Emperor Yongchang looked at Fan Qingjao. Although he didn't show any smile, his expression at least improved a little. If she was thinking about him when she spoke, he would really have to suspect something. But speaking of it, the queen did a good job. It seemed that she really had Fan Qingjao under control. This can only be said that the prince did a good job. Even the queen couldn't hide it. She really thought that Fan Qingjao was marrying the prince is here to achieve a marriage. He then looked at the prince beside him, who stood beside him obediently. From the beginning to the end, he never said a word to Fan Qingjao, as if the matter had nothing to do with him. Emperor Yongchang thought for a while and then looked at the prince and said, "You are lucky to have such a considerate princess. You should cherish it." "My father's words, I will definitely keep them in mind." Bailey Fengming said so, but he still stood beside the emperor motionless, as if he didn't care about Fan Qingjiao's life or death at all. Emperor Yongchang looked at the prince's expression again, and then withdrew his gaze. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 959. Chapter 959, completely caught off guard. Empress Zhen 11 smiled and invited the emperor into the palace. "I heard that the emperor is in a very high mood today. Why do you have time to come to my concubine?" Emperor Yongchang patted the queen's hand and said, "While eating today, I suddenly remembered the days when I took the queen to the palace for hunting. I felt emotional and wanted to come to the queen's place to have a look. Queen Jingzi. This old scumbag really talks all the time without even taking a breath. When she was young, she often accompanied the emperor to the palace, but when was it just the two of them? Now you are convulsing and want to run to the palace, but you put the hat on my head. If you are not a scumbag, who is a scumbag? If you are really a scumbag, you have to die." It's hard for the emperor to still be thinking about the past. So many years have passed, and I still don't look like I did when I was young. However, since the emperor wants to go to the palace, I have to stay with the emperor, that is, those in various palaces. Junior, if you really keep following me, it will be really noisy." Queen Zhen 11 looked at the emperor beside her with tender eyes. Her eyes seemed to be full of water. "I don't care, I like children. I just feel sorry for the emperor." Emperor Yongchang listened to the queen's words and squeezed the queen's hand in emotion, but he said, "Since it is the day of the 15th reunion, it should be lively. The queen does not need to worry about me." When Empress Zhen 11 saw that she had said everything like this and the emperor was still unmoved, she knew that no matter what she said, it would be a waste of words. It would be better for her to follow the emperor's instructions and say a few words that the emperor was willing to hear. The emperor was very happy. Sure enough, the smile on Emperor Yongchang's face was obviously a little wider. Fan Qingjao sat aside and watched the emperor's every move. The wrinkles on his face were obviously more sunken than before, especially his eyes, which began to glow with a turbid light under the sunlight. It's just the side effects of taking those elixirs. Emperor Yongchang sat in Fenji Palace for a while, then stood up and left. Bailey Fengming wanted to see his father off in person, but was kept behind by the emperor. "You are here to chat with your mother. Speaking of which, you and the crown princess haven't seen each other for a long time. We are people who want to live together in the future. It is always hard to be left out." Emperor Yongchang's words were clearly a reminder. Bailey Fengming still needs to stabilize Fan Qingjao. Bailey Fengming nodded in fear, with a submissive look. As soon as the emperor left, no one in the palace spoke immediately. It was not until Lily came and went to guard the outside of the palace that Queen Zhengxi's tense nerves finally relaxed. Looking at her son and daughter-in-law in front of her, Queen Zhen 11 sighed and said, "I'm afraid you have understood the emperor's attitude. I'm afraid it is inevitable to go to the palace this time." Fan Qinjiao looked at Bailey Fengming and asked, "Why does the emperor suddenly want to go to the palace?" Bailey Fengming said, "Today at the banquet, the sixth prince of the Donglan kingdom suddenly told his father about the days of hunting in Donglan. My father was quite touched when he saw it, but the food and wine used at today's banquet were all, it was prepared in the palace a few days ago." At the beginning, Bailey Fengming was ordered to prepare for the 15th banquet in the palace, but the list from the imperial dining room was sent directly to the emperor for review without passing through him. Bailey Fengming had doubts in his heart at that time, so he asked Xiaoxian to copy an identical menu. Although he only glanced at it briefly at the time, most of the dishes were still fresh in his memory. Hearing these words, Fan Qinjiao understood that the banquet that Bailey Fengming was preparing in the palace was actually the banquet that the emperor wanted to entertain the sixth prince of Donglan kingdom today. In this case, the emperor had planned to go to the palace to celebrate the festival early in the morning. Otherwise, all the prepared things are placed in front of the sixth prince of Donglan kingdom. What will the others eat and drink on the 15th day? Just as he was thinking about it, he heard the Queen Mother say, "It seems that the emperor has hidden it from everyone. If so, what will you do with your original plan? Since we won't be celebrating the festival in the palace, wouldn't all the previous planning be in vain?" Fan Qinjiao had just discussed with everyone how to deal with the situation on the 15th. Even if it was changed from a royal palace to a temporary palace, it would not have much impact. But looking at Bailey Fengming's side, "I'm afraid it will all be in vain. Everything that was secretly deployed will naturally be overturned, but fortunately there is still a long way to go from the palace to the palace. It is not too late to make preparations again." During this period when Bailey Fengming spoke, his eyebrows wrinkled slightly. Very obviously, I started to replan in my heart. Fan Qinjiao knew that this matter was easy to say, but not so easy to do. From this point of view, not only concubine Yu is on guard, but the emperor is also on tight guard. Otherwise, how could he have notified everyone to go to the palace one day in advance? It was obviously premeditated. Queen Zhen 11's face didn't look good either. But she still remembered Fengming saying that the new Taoist temple was near the palace, so what was the emperor going to do? "Are you going to let the third prince kidnap the child and throw it directly into the alchemy furnace?" Fan Qinjiao looked at the empress's face and knew very well that the emperor would never let the juniors from various palaces go to the palace to celebrate the festival without any reason. As for the reason, it seemed that there was only one answer left. Bailey Fengming was busy withdrawing his previous arrangements and studying new countermeasures with Lin Yi and Xiaoxian, so he had no time to sit here with the queen for a long time. Fan Qinjiao got up early when he saw this. After returning to the mansion in the western suburbs, Fan Qinjiao called Ningtian and Lanjie together. "You two go to the mansions of the sixth prince, the second prince and Prince Pinglai, and tell everyone there is no need to panic, everything will go according to plan." "Can?" Ninggan said blankly. "In that case, shouldn't the young ladies meet and discuss things to appease people's hearts? The current situation makes people even more uneasy when we meet. Now this news can be said to have caught everyone off guard. It is understandable that people in various mansions are panicking. The more this happens, the more Fan Qinjiao has to show himself confident, so as to make others feel at ease. If you are really on the cusp of the storm, you will have to gather people together in a hurry. It is only a small thing to cause chaos in the rush, but once Bailey Rongs hears something, the big news will be. Today, Bailey Rongs has a small movement, and it is clear that the alertness has been filled." End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 960. Chapter 960 Accompanying Cao Lishan. As soon as Ningtian and Lanja left the house, the invitation from the palace was delivered to the house. Soon, Nanny Su opened the door and walked in. "Little miss, the old lady invites you." Fan Kinjao knew that since the emperor had threatened to ask juniors from all residences to go to the palace, it was impossible for her name to be the only one on the list of people who went to the Hua family. However, Fan Kinjao had already made a plan in his mind and planned to take Mu Yan to the palace with him. In the main courtyard, not only Tao Yuxian and Hua Yaoding were sitting, but Cao Lishan, Wu Qiuzao, and the daughters-in-law of each room were also there. Fan Kinjao first saluted his grandfather and grandmother, and just wanted to say that he would take Mu Yan with him when he heard Tao Yuxian say, "The emperor has given a lot of places this time. Apart from your grandfather, of course your sister-in-law and brother Ren are going, and King's Inn. I originally planned to let Mu Yan accompany you, but Mu Yan was infected with the cold a few days ago, and I'm afraid she won't be able to go out." Fan Kinjao was stunned. He didn't expect Mu Yan to be sick. Is it serious? The fourth daughter-in-law Yafu did not expect that. The first thing Xiao Kinjao thought of was not that Mu Yan could not accompany her, but that she was worried about Mu Yan's health. She quickly smiled and said, "It's not serious, but it's a bit difficult to breathe. My mother-in-law has already prescribed medicine, I guess it will be fine in a while." Fan Kinjao felt relieved after hearing this. Tao Yuxian looked at Fan Kinjao and said, "But there is always one less place in the quota given by the emperor. I discussed with your grandfather that it would be better to let Sister Shan go along with her, which would be a great experience." Hearing this, Fan Kinjao naturally wanted to refuse. She didn't understand Cao Lishan's temperament, and she probably didn't have time to pay attention to Cao Lishan when she went to the palace. But before Fan Kinjao could speak, Cao Lishan knelt on the ground and said, "Lishan is not going anywhere. Lishan is staying with her aunt in the house." Tao Yuxian looked at Cao Lishan, who was kneeling in front of him, sighed and said, "Those who go to the palace are from official families. If you can really meet a suitable one in the palace, you will not be treated badly in this life." Cao Lishan said, "I am just a daughter of a small family, and I don't dare to have such thoughts. Besides, cousin Kinjao has to take care of the juniors. I can't cause any more trouble to cousin Kinjao." Facing Cao Lishan's sensible appearance, even Hua Yaoding was a little touched. "I still remember that the first child in the family who was so sensible was Xiao Kinjao." Tao Yuxian felt even more pity when he saw Cao Lishan like this. "You child, you have suffered too much in the past to become so sensible, just like Xiao Kinjao." Cao Lishan turned back, looked at Fan Kinjao and said, "Don't worry, cousin Kinjao, I will definitely accompany your great aunt for you. Cousin Kinjao, don't worry and go to the palace." Fan Kinjao looked at Cao Lishan and said, "Since grandma said so, just pack up and go to the palace with me." Cao Lishan was stunned for a moment, as if she felt that she heard something wrong. Hunted until Tao Yuxian pulled him up with a smile and carefully told him to go to the palace to listen to Fan Kinjao. Cao Lishan quickly thanked Fan Kinjao. Fan Kinjao nodded lightly. In fact, she just wanted to make her grandmother feel comfortable. Hua Yaoding had no time to think about other things now. He looked at Fan Kinjao and said, "What did the prince have to say about the palace?" Of course Fan Kinjao knew that what his grandfather asked was not really about what Bailey Fengming said, so he thought about it and said, "It's a coincidence that when I heard the news today, the prince was also in Fenji Palace." Hua Yaoding understood after hearing this. It seemed that Xiao Kinjao and the prince had already passed their breath, so he also breathed a sigh of relief. Everyone listened for a while, then stood up and left. As soon as Fan Kinjao left the house, he heard Cao Lishan shouting from behind, "Cousin Kinjao, please stay." Fan Kinjao turned around and asked, "Cousin Lishan, is there anything else?" Cao Lishan looked at Fan Kinjao's distant look, lowered her head and said, I can see that cousin Kinjao doesn't seem to like me very much. I also know that I have troubled the Hua family during this time, but I still want to invite cousin Kinjao. Don't worry, I won't let cousin Kinjao worry about it when I go to the palace. Fan Kinjao has been busy refining alchemy during this period and has not observed Cao Lishan well, but she can still be keenly aware that Cao Lishan is different now from when they first met. But for Fan Kinjao, Cao Lishan is just a passerby in the Hua family, so as long as she stays by herself, Fan Kinjao is not willing to waste too much thought. But before Fan Kinjao could speak, Wu Qiuzao came over and said with a smile, Lishan, you are too sensitive. My sister-in-law has the best temper in the house. No one in our house has said anything bad about my sister-in-law. I just hope that cousin Kinjao can like me, Cao Lishan said authentically. Wu Qiuzao said with a smile, what a silly girl. You don't want to live with your sister-in-law for the rest of your life. Your thoughts should wait until you find your husband's family before you can use them on your husband. Is that so? I understand. Cao Lishan nodded as if she didn't understand, and then walked away in a daze. Wu Qiuzao looked at Cao Lishan's leaving figure and lowered his voice. Lishan is really becoming more and more sensible, especially after she woke up. Maybe she was really afraid that the Hua family would also abandon her. Fan Kinjao said calmly. He said, Cao Lishan is a member of the Cao family. Even if she lives in the Hua family temporarily, it won't change anything. Grandma now owes Cao Lishan a lot. I just hope it can make Grandma feel more comfortable. Wu Qiuzao nodded, that's what you said. Since coming back from Huguo Temple, everyone in the house has seen the difference between my grandmother and Lishan. They probably really feel that they are indebted to me. After all, my grandmother is that person I have never owed anyone anything in my life. It is the person who has been open-minded all his life and is most afraid of owing others favors. It is precisely because of this that Fan Kinjao has to tolerate Cao Lishan unconditionally. Only in this way can his grandmother's debt to Cao Lishan be reduced. After separating from Wu Qiuzao, Fan Kinjao took a carriage to Sun Che's house in person. Although the emperor's list this time contains the words of love, Hua Yuelian is already married, and even her name is Sun Hua, so she is not qualified to go to the palace with the Hua family. Hua Yuelian and Sun Che were about to go to sleep. When they heard the news of Fan Kinjao's arrival, the couple were stunned for a moment and quickly got up to wash and dress. It was Fan Kinjao who was sitting in the main hall. He watched his mother come in a hurry, but Sun Che held her hand the whole time. He was afraid that his mother would bump into her, so he silently raised his lips. What happened? As soon as Hua Yuelian entered the door, she pulled Fan Kinjao and looked at her carefully. Her daughter knew very well that if something really didn't happen, how could she come here in the middle of the night? Knock on the door? Sun Che also knew Fan Kinjao's temperament and asked with the same concern, I heard that the emperor held a banquet in the palace today. Could it be that something happened in the palace? Fan Kinjao smiled and shook his head, and then told him about going to the palace with King Xin. Hua Yuelian and Sun Che were both stunned when they heard this. It's not that I don't believe Fan Kinjao, I just feel a little surprised and confused. However, since the emperor has made a decree, neither Hua Yuelian nor Sun Che can say a word no. Go and bring the young lady over. Yes, ma'am. Soon, King Xin was hugged by the wet nurse. King Xin, who had fallen asleep early in the morning, is now sleeping soundly in her swaddling clothes. Her face is all red from sleep, which makes people feel happy just looking at her. Hua Yuelian believed in her daughter, so she handed King Xin into Fan Kinjao's arms without even thinking about it. Speaking of which, since King Xin was born, we haven't had a few peaceful nights' sleep. Now it's okay to go out and play with King Xin, and we can have a solid sleep. When Sun Che heard this, he didn't know that Hua Yuelian was afraid that he would not trust the child to Fan Kinjao. Although Fan Kinjao was not his biological child, he still believed in Fan Kinjao. Your mother is right, we can just relax for a while, Sun Che said with a smile. Hua Yuelian didn't expect that Sun Che really agreed without saying anything. The surprise and touch in his eyes were so obvious. Sun Che. If the emperor's will is pressing on his head, then he can disagree without even wanting to agree? Furthermore, Fan Kinjao is a loving sister. If Fan Kinjao hadn't been the one to help her, she wouldn't have been a daughter, and even her wife wouldn't have known where to find her. Fan Kinjao looked at the loving appearance of his mother and Sun Che and smiled sincerely. Don't worry, mother and uncle Sun, I will definitely take good care of King Xin. Because King Xin is still nursing, even if Hua Yuelian cannot accompany her to the palace, she still has to be accompanied by a wet nurse. Before leaving, Grandma Zhang specifically told the young lady that this wet nurse was from her hometown. It was obvious that he told Fan Kinjao that this person was trustworthy. Fan Kinjao sat back on the carriage, looking at King Xin, who was sleeping soundly in his arms, thinking about what his mother had just said. I am afraid that when she was young, her mother had taken such painstaking care of her. So, it was her stupidity in her previous life that made her miss so much. End of this chapter.